Rowan Hale trudged along the fence line just after dawn,
Cowboy.
boots sinking into the snow left from the violent night storm. He scanned the ground for breaks or tracks, his breath clouding in the cold air. As he crouched to examine a set of coyote prints, a faint stain caught his eye, a smear of red pressed into the white. At first, Rowan assumed it was from a wounded animal, but when he followed the trail beneath a low pine tree, his pulse hammered in his throat. Curled beneath branches heavy with frost was a tiny Apache girl, no older than 6. Her lips were blue, her lashes frozen, her body a trembling shadow in the snow. Rowan dropped to his knees, panic roaring through him. He touched her back. She felt impossibly cold, like she was slipping into the dark. Without hesitation, he pulled off his coat and wrapped her in it, pressing her against his chest. "Don't fall asleep, little one. Stay with me," he whispered, voice breaking in the wind. As he carried her home, he felt every faint breath, as if her entire life was balanced in his arms. Inside his cabin, Rowan lit the stove, fed the flames urgently, and set warm water to heat. The child made a soft sound, barely a whisper, murmuring something that sounded like, "Lani." Rowan leaned closer. "All right, Lani, you hold on. I've got you." The storm outside deepened, but he stayed awake through the night, warming blankets, checking her breathing, whispering encouragement into the cold air. By the second morning, the storm still raged, burying the prairie under a white, endless sky. Rowan was outside splitting wood when he heard a strange dragging sound carried by the wind. He turned slowly, muscles tightening. Out of the blinding snow appeared a tall Apache woman, her body swaying with exhaustion. She had the stature of a warrior, strong shoulders, powerful build, but her skin was marked with bruises, cuts, and dried blood. Her breaths came in sharp, broken gasps. She stopped only a few steps from him and rasped, "You are keeping my daughter!" Rowan didn't raise a weapon, didn't back away. "She's inside, alive. Go to her." The woman staggered toward the door, nearly collapsing. Rowan caught her, supporting her weight, feeling her body as hard as oak and cold as stone. He guided her into the cabin. When her eyes landed on the sleeping child wrapped in blankets near the fire, her entire body trembled. Tears filled her exhausted eyes, her rough hands shaking as she touched Lani's cheek. "My little Lani," she whispered, voice shattering into a sob. Rowan set warm water beside her. "Sit, you're bleeding." She looked up at him, wary, guarded, but her desperation had faded into something quieter. "My name is Sarah." Rowan nodded, tossing more wood into the stove as the wind clawed at the walls. The road to the Apache mountain range was completely buried. Sarah could barely stand, let alone travel. "You and the girl stay here," Rowan said. "When the weather clears, we'll figure it out." Sarah stared at the flames before whispering, "No white man ever helped us like this." Rowan didn't boast or explain. "I just did what was right." That night, the storm still roared over the prairie, but inside the cabin, the fragile warmth of one small fire held 3 souls together. Lani breathed softly in her sleep, and Sarah sat nearby with a warrior's body but a mother's trembling hands. As the night deepened, Rowan tended the fire, keeping the cabin warm while Sarah watched her daughter with unblinking vigilance. Rows of scars lined her arms and shoulders, shadows of battles she had survived. Eventually, she broke the silence. "You never asked what happened." Rowan looked up from the fire. "If you want to talk, you will. I won't force it." Sarah let out a tired, almost surprised laugh. "White men don't say things like that." She pulled the blanket around herself, gathering strength. "My tribe was attacked. They killed all who couldn't flee. Elders, children." Her voice cracked. "I hid Lani beneath a bush. I ran the other direction to draw them away. I thought I'd die, but fate didn't take me." Her fists clenched. "When I came back, she was gone. All were gone." Rowan's voice softened. "How long did you search?" 2 days. No food, no sleep. I wandered like a ghost until I collapsed near your home." Silence fell again, broken only by the crackle of burning logs. Rowan nodded toward Lani. "She's safe now. You kept her alive long enough for me to find her." Sarah lowered her head, tears slipping free. "And only you made that possible." Between the firelight and the howling wind outside, the distance between them, 2 strangers bound by a storm and a child, began to slowly dissolve. The next morning the storm still lurked over the prairie, but inside the cabin warmth had settled like a quiet promise. Lani was awake enough to sip spoonfuls of the porridge Rowan made, each swallow slow but steady. Every time she reached for his hand, Sarah's dark eyes softened with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. Rowan spent part of the morning repairing the roof, hammering shingles back into place. Despite her wounds, Sarah insisted on helping. She carried heavy planks with one arm as if they weighed nothing, her strength forcing Rowan to glance at her more than once with quiet admiration. By late afternoon, snowfall had thinned to a gentle flurry. Sarah stood by the window, the dim light gliding across her scarred face, revealing both the brutality she had survived and the resilience that kept her standing. Rowan entered with a bowl of warm water. "You need more rest," he said. Sarah turned toward him, eyes no longer guarded, but open in a way that made the room feel smaller. "Rowan," she said his name for the first time, making him pause. She looked at her hands, rough and battered, then lifted her gaze to meet his, as if choosing every word with great weight. "You saved my daughter," Sarah said quietly. "You protected her like she was yours." Rowan swallowed, unsure why her voice carried so much meaning. "I just did what any decent person would have done." She stepped closer, close enough that Rowan could see her breath rise in small clouds between them. "No," she said, her tone firm and calm. "You did more than that. You gave her your warmth, your strength. You kept her alive." Her hand rose, gentle, trembling slightly, not from fear, but from everything she had pushed down for too long. She placed it over his heart, feeling the steady pulse beneath his shirt. Then, in a voice stripped of pretense or hesitation, she made a request no woman spoke lightly. "Share your life with me, plant your seed. Lani needs a father to stand beside her." Rowan stood still, not from shock, but from understanding the weight behind her words. The woman before him was not pleading. She was offering something sacred, holding out the remnants of her future with both hands. "Sarah," he breathed, his voice low. "Are you certain?" She rested her forehead against his, whispering with fierce honesty, "I have lost everything, but I choose to stay here, with you." There was no kiss then, no rush of passion, only the steady thrum of two souls recognizing each other in the quiet. That evening, the storm drifted away at last. A pale sunset stretched over the prairie, tinting the sky in violet and blue. Rowan built a larger fire than usual, sensing something unspoken hanging in the air. Sarah sat on the bed's edge, the flame light carving soft shadows across her strong features. Lani slept curled near the stove, wrapped tightly in blankets. Rowan knelt to set a bowl of warm water beside Sarah. "Your wounds need cleaning again," he murmured. Sarah stared at him for a long moment, so long Rowan wondered if he had offended her, until she rose and stepped toward him. "Are you afraid I will change my mind?" she asked, voice low like a challenge. Rowan let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "I'm afraid I'm not enough for the both of you." Sarah cupped his face with her large calloused hands, aligning his gaze with hers. "You saved my child. You warmed her. You guarded her when the world turned against her." She leaned her forehead to his, whispering with quiet conviction, "No man could be better." Rowan felt something stirring deep inside, something that felt like purpose, like belonging. When she kissed him, it was slow and deep, not born of impulsive desire, but from two souls who had been wandering for too long and finally found each other. Rowan wrapped his arms around her, holding her strong, trembling body as though anchoring her back into the world. They shared a night that was not loud or wild. It was gentle, careful, filled with gratitude and the fragile blooming of hope. Later, Sarah lay with her head on his chest, her hand over his heartbeat. "If tomorrow you want me gone," she whispered, "I will leave." Rowan tightened his arms around her without hesitation. "Tomorrow and every day after, I want you here." Sarah smiled in the darkness, a small smile, but enough to thaw the last of winter's chill inside the cabin. For the first time in years, Rowan slept without the crushing weight of loneliness. For the first time in months, Sarah slept without fear, and as the fire burned low, the cabin, once just a refuge from the storm, became something new. A home being rebuilt from the broken pieces of two lives. A place where a child could laugh again, a place where a warrior woman and a lonely rancher could quietly begin stitching their futures together. Winter lingered stubbornly over the prairie, but one morning Rowan stepped onto the porch and felt something different beneath his boots, a softness in the snow that hinted at change. The clouds thinned, and for the first time in weeks, faint sunlight pierced through. Inside the cabin, little Lani sat near the firewood pile, giggling at a stick she was trying to balance. It was the first laugh Rowan had heard from her. Sarah knelt beside her, tying back her daughter's black hair with surprising gentleness for someone built like a warrior. Rowan paused in the doorway, watching them with a warmth that sank deep into his bones. It had been years since he'd looked at a home and felt something bright pulling at him from inside. Later, while Lani napped, Sarah stepped onto the porch. She stood beside Rowan silently at first, letting the cold breeze brush across her face. For a moment he thought she had come just to breathe in the rare calm. But then she spoke his name softly. "Rowan." He set down the mallet, turning fully toward her, sensing the weight behind her tone. Sarah looked toward the distant mountains, her breath long and heavy, as though she carried entire seasons inside her. "I have been running for months," she said, "from battle to battle, from one grave to the next. I have no one left." She turned to him with eyes stripped of their usual steel, revealing something raw beneath. Vulnerability. "I want to stop running." Rowan listened without trying to fill the silence. Sarah continued, "I want a place where I don't have to look over my shoulder every night, where Lani can grow without fear." She took a careful breath. "I want to belong to you, if you will have me that way." Rowan didn't think. He simply stepped forward, placing his hands gently on her shoulders, feeling the trembling she tried to hide. "You already do," he said, his voice low and steady. "Everything you need is right here." Sarah closed her eyes, relief washing through her body like the first warm wind after winter. Then she took Rowan's hand and guided it slowly to her belly. "I think I carry your child," she whispered. Rowan searched her eyes, seeing both fear and hope flickering like twin flames. He pulled her into his arms and spoke with the weight of stone. "Then that is all the more reason for you to stay." Before Sarah could respond, a small voice called from inside the cabin. "Mama? Rowan?" Lani's voice drifted out, soft but curious. The two of them shared a smile, one shared by people who had found something they never expected, a home. Later that morning, sunlight filtered through the window for the first time in weeks. Lani toddled toward Rowan, wrapped in a blanket too big for her. She hesitated, eyes shy but bright. Then she tugged at his shirt hem. "Rowan, may I call you father?" Her question struck him like warm thunder. Rowan knelt, leveling his gaze to hers. Lani stared back with all the courage a child could muster, her small fingers curled around the fabric of his shirt. He placed a hand gently on her head. "You already have," he murmured. She blinked, confused. Rowan smiled softly. "Every time you hugged me, every time you held my hand when you were scared, every time you stayed close to me, you were calling me father without saying the word." Tears filled Lani's eyes, but they weren't from sadness. She lunged forward, wrapping her tiny arms around him with such fierce trust that Rowan nearly lost his balance. He held her tight against his chest, his heart tightening with a feeling he thought had been buried years ago, after his wife's passing. Sarah stood in the doorway, watching the moment unfold. The soft morning light touched her long black hair. There was no jealousy on her face, only a calm contentment. "I knew she would choose you," she whispered. Rowan met her gaze, still cradling Lani. Suddenly he understood something profound. The lonely cabin of a widowed rancher had become the home of three. That afternoon, as Lani slept, Rowan retrieved an old wooden box from beneath his bed. Inside was a photograph of his late wife, a gentle woman taken by illness 4 years before. He sat with the picture in silence. The grief no longer burned, but the soft ache remained, a quiet echo of a life once lived. He kissed the edge of the frame, then placed it into a hidden compartment only he knew about. On the shelf, he placed something new in its place, a small hand-stitched seed pouch Sarah had made, its Apache threads woven with care. As spring slowly brushed its colors across the prairie, the world around the cabin began to stir again. Rowan spent his mornings repairing the fence line, while Lani followed like a small shadow, carrying nails in her tiny hands. Sarah worked beside them, stronger than any person Rowan had ever known. She lifted heavy boards with ease, her hair catching the breeze like black fire. The cabin no longer felt like a place Rowan had built to hide inside. It felt like the beginning of something living. One afternoon, Rowan and Sarah dug a small patch of soil behind the cabin. The air smelled of thawing earth and early flowers. Sarah handed him a handful of corn and bean seeds. "My mother planted these every spring," she said quietly. "Now, they belong to this home." The word home hit Rowan deep, settling in a part of his chest that had been empty for too long. Lani helped water the soil, nearly soaking herself every time she tipped the dipper, bursting into high-pitched laughter that pulled Rowan's own laughter out with it. Sarah shook her head with a smile as she watched them, two souls who had unknowingly become each other's missing pieces. By late afternoon, the three of them built a small chicken coop together. Rowan hammered nails, Sarah held the boards steady with her powerful hands, and Lani ran around collecting dry leaves for nesting material, declaring each leaf the prettiest one in the whole prairie. Neither Rowan nor Sarah corrected her. The world felt lighter with Lani's voice filling the air. As the sun began to melt into the horizon, the family sat on the porch. The breeze was warm, carrying the smell of wood smoke and early spring. Lani slept across Sarah's lap, her breathing soft and steady. Sarah leaned against Rowan's shoulder, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. For a long time they said nothing, letting the quiet speak for them. Then Sarah looked up and murmured, "We are not married." Rowan pressed a small kiss onto her forehead. "We don't need to be," he answered gently. "No vows, no rings. What matters is that we wake up in the same place every morning." Sarah absorbed his words slowly, her hand sliding across her belly where new life slowly grew. She exhaled softly, the sound filled with both peace and surrender. Rowan watched her with quiet awe. He knew the world would not understand her strength, not the kind forged from fear and loss, but the kind born from surviving it. The cabin, once quiet enough for Rowan to hear his own sorrow echo through the room, was now filled with warmth. At night, the fire glowed against the wooden walls. Lani's laughter drifted through the small rooms, and Sarah's presence, solid, steady, and brave, became the heartbeat of their new life. One evening, the three sat on the porch as dusk melted into night. The air held the scent of fresh soil and new beginnings. Sarah leaned her head on Rowan's shoulder. Lani slept curled between them. Rowan looked at them, one a fierce warrior who had survived impossible darkness, the other a child who had nearly been swallowed by winter. "This," he whispered, "is everything I never knew I needed." Sarah's eyes softened. "You gave us a place to breathe again," she murmured, "and you gave me hope I thought I'd buried with my tribe." She rested her hand over his, their fingers intertwined like roots settling deep into the earth. Love didn't arrive loudly. It came in the smallest moments. The gentle way Rowan brushed snow from Sarah's shoulders, the way Sarah wrapped her arms around both Rowan and Lani when the wind howled at night, the way Lani whispered, "Father," without fear. There were no ceremonies, no crowds, only the quiet promise of choosing each other day after day, storm after storm. One night, as they prepared to sleep, Rowan whispered, "Sarah, I've lived many years alone. I didn't expect to find a family in the middle of winter." Sarah placed a hand over his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath her palm. "Family doesn't always come from blood," she said. "Sometimes it comes from being brave enough to stay." Rowan kissed her brow, holding her close as the fire dimmed. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the small cabin window, soft gold falling across the wooden floor. Rowan, Sarah, and Lani stood outside watching the prairie wake beneath the new season. In that quiet moment, Rowan realized something simple and absolute. They had chosen each other, and that choice was stronger than vows, stronger than storms, stronger than winter itself. They weren't bound by obligation, they were bound by love. A love sturdy enough to outlast time, wind, and the memory of loneliness. A love that turned a lonely cabin into a home. And from that day forward, the three of them, man, woman, and child, walked into spring not as survivors, but as a family.